The day was perfect. June sunshine, 70 degrees, the scent of white roses filling the courtyard. I was standing in my custom tuxedo, 30 minutes away from marrying the woman I loved, Chloe. My life felt complete. Then my sister, Sarah, walked in. She wasn't supposed to be there. We'd had a petty argument. She didn't come to wish me well. She held a tear-stained envelope. Inside was a single, terrible photograph. Chloe, my fiancé, kissing her, my own sister, just 3 weeks before our wedding. The wedding was called off instantly. My life shattered. My grief was absolute. But the final icy realization came a year later when I received their wedding invitation. They were getting married. My sister, my fiancé. They thought they had won their forbidden prize. They thought I would simply vanish, drowning in shame. They didn't realize that I spent that year meticulously gathering the one piece of documented evidence that would burn their perfect day to the ground, transforming their moment of triumph into my meticulous final revenge. If you've ever felt the absolute, devastating sting of betrayal by the two people you trusted most, your sibling and your partner, hit that like button and subscribe. Family loyalty is everything until it's gone. Tell me your story in the comments. My name's Arthur Art Vance. I'm 45, a project manager living in downtown Chicago. I grew up believing in two constants, my family and the simple rules of fair play. My sister, Sarah, is 6 years older than me. We were the classic sibling dynamic. I was the younger, easygoing one. She was the driven, focused, successful one. We shared a childhood marked by that easy, unspoken loyalty, or so I thought. Chloe came into my life when I was 40. She was a brilliant designer, vibrant, full of energy, everything I had ever wanted. We planned our wedding for June 12th. I poured my heart into every detail, every minute choice, convinced that this day was the secure cornerstone of my future. This story isn't just about the canceled wedding, though. It's about the surgical deceit behind the cancellation and the cold, unyielding revenge I delivered on their wedding day. Chloe and I had been engaged for 18 months. The planning was stressful but joyful. Sarah was my best woman, a title we invented because she was more than just a bridesmaid. She was supposed to be my anchor, my confidant, and I had trusted her implicitly with the most intimate details of my life and our relationship. Looking back now, the clues were there, hidden in plain sight, disguised by the convenient cloak of family familiarity and my own trusting nature. Sarah, the driven one, always commanded attention, and she naturally drew Chloe in. Their banter always felt a little too easy, their shared glances a little too knowing, especially when they discussed Sarah's difficult corporate projects, a world I didn't fully inhabit. I dismissed it as siblings-in-law bonding, the easy chemistry of two high achievers. I was too wrapped up in the details, the seating charts, the caterers, the old family china, to see the storm brewing right under my nose. I was blind, trusting a foundation that had already eroded. The morning of June 12th started like a dream. The weather was perfect. The air in the groom's suite smelled of fresh linen and expensive cologne. I felt a sense of complete, calm joy, a peace I hadn't known since that day on the playground. I was ready. Then, at 3:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, the door burst open. It wasn't my best man with a shot of whiskey. It was Sarah. She was dressed in civilian clothes, not her best woman attire. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was visibly streaked with what looked like genuine, painful tears. "Art," she gasped, clutching a piece of paper so tightly the edges were crushed. "I can't let you do this. I can't live with the guilt." My heart instantly turned to ice. My sense of peace evaporated. "What are you talking about, Sarah? Get out of here. You're not supposed to see me." She ignored me, rushing forward and pressing the crumpled, tear-stained envelope into my hands. "It's not about the fight we had. It's about her. It's about Chloe." Inside was a crumpled, slightly grainy color photograph dated 3 weeks earlier. It was taken in a quiet, secluded park near Chloe's studio. The focus was undeniable. It showed Chloe, my fiancée, holding Sarah, my sister, in a tight, passionate embrace. Their lips were locked. The dagger was a plunged chest, but the real poison was Sarah's accompanying monologue, her meticulously crafted confession. "It was just once, a terrible drunken mistake. It happened after her final bachelorette dinner. We were both drunk, devastated about, well, everything. It meant nothing, but I can't let you marry her without knowing. I can't live with the guilt knowing I kept this from you." She was sobbing, dramatic and pleading. My groomsmen were frozen in horror. My father, rushing in, looked horrified, instantly moving to console Sarah. I didn't need any more evidence. The photograph, Sarah's performative tears, the devastating last-minute timing, it was an overwhelming tidal wave of proof. I looked at the custom tuxedo, the ring in my pocket, and the life I had planned, and felt it all disintegrate into dust. The truth of the betrayal was so overwhelming, the logistics of the event so time-sensitive, that rational thought was impossible. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I walked out of the room, straight down the hall, my footsteps heavy on the polished wood floor, and told the wedding coordinator in a flat, dead voice that the event was canceled. The sheer humiliation of uninvited guests leaving, the caterers packing up the elaborate food, the florist tearing down the arch, it was a public, painful obliteration of my entire future, a scar left on every memory of my life. Chloe tried to talk to me later. She claimed the photograph was taken out of context, the embrace innocent, a drunken moment of comfort during a difficult time. But her eyes were shifty, her face a portrait of guilt. Sarah's guilt and confession had done its work. The guilt was now all mine. Guilt for being blind, guilt for the financial waste, guilt for believing in Chloe. I moved into a small, temporary apartment far from the neighborhood. I took a forced leave from my job. I was paralyzed by grief and shame, blocking both Chloe and Sarah, trying to make the pain stop. But my analytical mind, the part of me that manages complex projects and demands primary sources, refused to rest. Why did Sarah wait until minutes before the ceremony? If she felt such immense guilt, why not tell me 3 weeks earlier when it first happened? The timing was too precise, too cruel to be accidental. It was my mother who, unintentionally, gave me the final key to the truth 3 months later. Over a painful, tearful lunch, she confessed her own observations. "Art," she whispered, "Chloe never tried to contact me after the cancellation. She didn't seem sorry for you. She seemed relieved." She admitted that Sarah hadn't been crying when she left the venue. She had been wiping her eyes dramatically, almost practicing the gesture. My father, focused on comforting me, had let the details slide in the chaos. Then came the final, brutal realization. Sarah wasn't suffering from guilt. She was executing a surgical strike. By presenting the evidence just minutes before the ceremony, she ensured maximum damage. The cancellation was irreversible, the humiliation total, while simultaneously painting herself as the moral victim who sacrificed her secret for my happiness. 6 months after my scheduled wedding, the ultimate confirmation arrived in the mail. A perfectly embossed, pristine engagement announcement. Sarah and Chloe. They had been engaged for a month, celebrating their stolen prize. They had lied. They had planned this. The drunken mistake was a coordinated, deliberate sabotage, timed perfectly to replace me. Sarah had not saved me from a cheating fiancé. She had ensured Chloe became her fiancé. The guilt turned into a cold, hard, intellectual rage. I had been betrayed, humiliated, and financially ruined. I never got the deposits back. They thought I would disappear forever, a forgotten footnote in their love story. I spent the next 6 months planning my revenge. This couldn't be a petty act, no bad reviews or slashed tires. It had to be public, definitive, and directly linked to their core lie. It had to happen at the exact climactic moment of their proclaimed victory, their wedding day. My sister, the queen of optics, had booked the most exclusive, expensive venue in the state, the Grand Atrium, complete with a strict no non-invited guests policy and a full security team. Getting in would be difficult, but my project management background made me meticulous, a ghost moving through their plans. I knew their method. They had used encrypted messaging apps for the private planning, but Chloe had one weakness: her professional calendar. Designers are slaves to their schedules, and she was pathologically organized. I still had the login details for an old shared calendar we used for the initial wedding planning. I logged in. The smoking gun wasn't in the shared log, it was in the hidden layer of her private appointments, visible only to me because the permissions had never been revoked. 2 entries stood out, meticulously labeled: S-date, night dinner, private dinner, 10 p.m., dated 4 months before my canceled wedding, and weekend getaway, Poconos cabin, confidential, dated 2 months before my canceled wedding. These weren't drunken mistakes. These were planned, deliberate trysts. I downloaded the entire calendar log, cross-referencing it with my own texts to show I was elsewhere on those dates. I had the irrefutable evidence of the timeline. The photograph was the effect. The calendar was the cause. The wedding was set on October 10th. I knew I couldn't get an invitation. My parents, ashamed and caught between us, had simply stopped talking to me, hoping the problem would resolve itself. My strategy was purely logistical: infiltrate, execute, vanish. I used my old company email from a project I had recently finished to contact the Grand Atrium's event manager. I claimed I was a historical researcher compiling a book on the architecture of the venue, specifically asking for 10 minutes access 2 hours before the ceremony to photograph the detailed archways. My professional credentials and detailed architectural requests worked perfectly. I had my official company ID. I was in. The Grand Atrium had a massive, elaborate sound system for the ceremony and reception. My revenge weapon wasn't the documents. It was a simple, high-powered Bluetooth audio transmitter, tiny enough to fit inside my coat lining. I arrived at 3 p.m., 2 hours before the ceremony. The building was buzzing, but the main ballroom was empty except for technicians making final checks. I was led to the balcony. While the technician was adjusting a microphone, I discreetly slipped behind a massive velvet curtain. There, hidden behind the drapery, was a single unmarked audio input jack connected directly to the main speaker system. A simple wire and a switch. I connected my transmitter, pairing it immediately to my phone. I tested it with a faint classical music track. Perfect. I had control of their entire sound system. My confession couldn't be anonymous. It had to be delivered personally to the most important person in Chloe's life, her deeply traditional, wealthy, and hyper-conservative father, Mr. Davison. His reputation was everything. I had the calendar logs printed out, meticulously highlighting the S-date night and Poconos entries, placing them inside a beautifully sealed envelope labeled "To be opened immediately after the vows." I waited until I saw the first wave of guests arrive, spotting Mr. Davison, regal and proud, taking his seat. As the usher checked him in, I slipped out from behind the curtain, walked quickly down the aisle, and pressed the envelope into Mr. Davison's hand. "A small token of respect," I whispered, before disappearing quickly through a side entrance, blending into the catering staff. I was already in my rental car watching the venue from a safe distance by the time the ceremony began. I waited 1 hour. I visualized the moment. The lighting is perfect. The minister is speaking. Sarah, radiant in her expensive gown, is holding Chloe's hand, staring into her eyes, thinking she has won her ultimate prize. The minister reached the pinnacle, "And you may now exchange your vows." I pulled out my phone. I disabled the classical music track, and then I pressed play on my phone. The Grand Atrium's massive, crystal-clear speakers were now controlled by me. What I played was not a recording of Sarah and Chloe talking. That would be too messy, too easily dismissed. I played a meticulously edited 3-minute sound file I had created. The track started with a dramatic, low swell of discordant orchestral music cutting through the silence of the vows. Then came a voice, a professional voiceover I had hired, reading the actual calendar entries in a clear, detached, almost robotic tone, leaving no room for emotional interpretation. Voice. Confirmation. Entry 1. Chloe Davison, private dinner with Sarah Vance. Date, February 14th. Location, Soho Grill. 4 months prior to the planned wedding with Arthur Vance. A piercing, single, high-pitched chime rang out, cutting through the music. Voice. Confirmation. Entry 2. Chloe Davison, weekend getaway with Sarah Vance. Date, April 1st. Location, Pocono's Cabin. 2 months prior to the planned wedding with Arthur Vance. A second, louder chime, like a final judgment. Voice. Confirmation. The conversation used to cancel the previous wedding was a fraudulent lie. This marriage is founded on calculated, documented fraud and betrayal dating back 120 days before the alleged drunken mistake. The music swelled again, a final deafening statement, overwhelming the venue with sound. The effect was instantaneous and total. The music, the cold, machine-like voice, the precision of the dates, it didn't allow for denial. It was like a forensic report blasting through a 1,000-watt sound system. I saw the ensuing chaos through my binoculars from my safe distance. Sarah stood frozen, her face moving from beautiful bride to absolute terror. Chloe looked around frantically, desperate to shut off the source of the noise. The minister, utterly lost, held his hands up in confusion. But the most important reaction was Mr. Davison's. I saw him tear open the envelope I had given him. He saw the highlighted calendar entries matching the robotic dates he had just heard. He realized he had been played, manipulated by his own daughter and her conniving partner. The shame of being lied to publicly by his own family in front of all their most important business and society friends was too much. He didn't look at Sarah, he didn't look at Chloe. He stood up, rigid and furious, and walked straight out of the building, leaving the stunned brides abandoned at the altar. The rest of the Davison family, horrified by the public spectacle, followed his lead. The wedding was over. Sabotaged. I drove back to Chicago the next day, not with anger, but with a profound, quiet sense of balance. I had not destroyed their lives. I had merely shown their lives for what they were, a foundation of lies which they themselves had built. The family fallout was devastating. My parents were furious at both of us, but they finally acknowledged the depth of Sarah's calculated malice and deceit. The scandal effectively ruined Sarah and Chloe's social standing. The wedding was called off indefinitely. Mr. Davison, I later learned, froze all corporate support for Chloe, refusing to subsidize a partnership built on such public dishonor. I never saw Sarah or Chloe again. My life didn't magically heal overnight, but the constant churning need for justice was finally satisfied. I learned that revenge doesn't bring back what you lost, but it can stop the person who stole from taking anything else. By exposing the documented truth on her day of victory, I reclaimed the only thing they hadn't stolen, my integrity and my peace of mind. I found peace not in a new partner, but in my own strength, knowing that I can survive the worst betrayal and emerge whole, armed with the precise, unassailable truth. If you've been hurt by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, remember, the truth is your most powerful wedding gift. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in justice even when it's hard-won, please share this video. And remember, never let someone else write the ending of your story. Thank you for listening.